Hi everybody. In this video we are going to show how we take a migrated application and extract a piece of complex business logic from it to be reused through a REST API endpoint or a microservice. In the specific case, here we can see the employees of the organization, and there is the important payslip process where the salary of the employee gets generated. Now this is a very complex process. It does a lot of calculation and eventually comes up with the numbers. So we want to have the exact same functionality of being able to calculate the employee payslip, but instead of displaying it on the screen, we want to return it in JSON format to a REST API, which we can consume through a web application, mobile application, or another application. So here are the steps we're going to take. We're going to first of all figure out the data that we see on the screen. Where is it being stored? Where does it come from? We're going to figure out what inserts this data, what creates this data, and we're going to figure out what gets called when we click the payslip button over here. Once we do all that, we're going to create a new REST endpoint and put the code there and make it all go through a microservice REST API. Sounds like a lot, but it's actually simpler than it sounds. So first of all, let's run the payslip process and figure out where this data comes from. To do that, we're going to break into the code in Visual Studio. And Visual Studio will take us to the controller display accumulators, which is the one that shows the data over here. If we scroll a little bit up, we can see that it uses the payslip print file entity. And if we go to its definition, we can actually see that this entity is from a memory data source, which means that it only exists in memory, which kind of indicates that this process creates this data on the fly, which is good news for us. We're going to go back to our controller, and we're going to copy the name of this entity, and we maintain a small list here in Word of things that we want to remember. So the data that we need is in this entity. Great. Next, let's figure out what happens when we click on the button. We can use the call stack for that, and we can see that the display accumulator was being called from the display payslip, which was being called from the conf core, which was being called from the display employees, was being called here from the employee master in the payslip zoom push button. PB stands for push button in their code. So let's double click on that, and Visual Studio will take us into the code and shows us that these controllers are being called here. They create default payslip and the batch main parent process. These are the controllers that are being called here. We can also see that we are using values from the employee master, the employees that are being displayed on the screen. We can see that the prefix is sal, company is 0, and employee is 1. That's the parameters we need to send. So we're going to say prefix sal, company 0, and employee 1. And sal is probably with capital letters, just like it is over here. Great. So we know that when we click this button, these two controllers are being called, these parameters are being sent in. Let's see exactly what happens when we do that. To understand what happens when we click on the button, we're going to use a utility called the profiler. I'm going to start the profiler and click on the button. And as we run the process, the profiler records everything that happens. And if I'm going to go and click End Profiling, I can see all the controllers that are being called. We can see these two controllers being called here. These are the same controllers we recorded earlier. And we can see all the data that they've been updating. If we're going to scroll down, we can see different tables. Let's search if we are ever inserting into these tables. So we're going to say search, insert, into, and the table. And we can see that data is being inserted here in the right accumulators controller. And we can see that it's been inserted here and here. All of these are indications that when we run the process, this data gets created on the fly, which is great for us for a microservice. So we know the tables that is being presented. We know the controllers that are being executed. We know the parameters that are being sent. All we need to do now is to create the REST API endpoint. To do that, I'm going to go to our web project, set it as our starter project, and I'm going to go to the employee master API controller and create a new entry here. Public data result payslip. Okay. And then I'm going to go back to the push button of Zoom, and I'm going to copy this code with me. I'm only going to copy this code and not this one because in the profiler we only saw these two controllers being executed, which is the one here and the one here. So I've copied it, switch back to our API, and I'll paste it here. And let's get it to work. Okay, instead of, let's start with the prefix. I don't need this if because we are running from the same system prefix. We can see here the 3 arguments that came previously from the table, and we know their values. We want to get them from the REST API. So we're going to define them as a parameter to our method. We're going to say string prefix int company int employee, and I'll replace the usage. Prefix company and employee, and over here also replace this one with the prefix. Great. Next we see there is a variable here error that is being sent and being used, and we can look and see that its type is Boolean. So we're going to create a bool column with the same type. Great, now everything will compile. Let's continue and review the parameters that are being sent. We can see here that the next parameter is display run options. And since we don't want to display the run options, we're going to change this to false. Finally, we're going to go here and return the result in JSON format of the content in the payslip print file entity. The ones that we saw earlier was being inserted or displayed in the controller where we viewed and inserted in the process that we've run. Let's go ahead and run this. And we'll go over to the browser and we'll open a new tab, localhost, payslip, and let's review the parameters actually that we want to put here. We want to say prefix. The name here matches the name here. Prefix sal, ampersand, company 0, ampersand, EMP 1. We can see the names here match the names that we've put over here, and the values are the ones that we've seen when we analyze the code. Let's run this. And since it's the first time it gets run, it takes it a while to load the project. And we can see the result in JSON format. Let's go ahead and change the employee number to employee number 2. And we can see that we're getting different results. That's exactly what we were looking for. So now we can have all that complex logic that existed in our application. We can have it back in JSON format and reuse it anywhere we want. So this entire process that sounded very complex took less than 10 minutes. And you can use that to reuse any piece of complex logic that you have in your application and expose it as a set of microservices that can expose it to other applications or the web or mobile applications. I hope you enjoyed this. See you next time.